studied a little bit and came up with a few things that are not going to be one of those things where, we should be admonish certain groups or get crazy about certain topics, but let's just look a little bit into some areas of how climate change, and these are issues that really are important. I mean, I would say you see it in the news on a day-to-day basis. You hear people saying this is the new clickbait word is existential threat to the world. Right? Anybody ever heard that? Like people say that? Yes? No? Nobody ever heard anybody say that? Let's just examine a little bit about what the Bible says about it. And, like I said, I'm not going to take a political stance on this. I think it's just interesting. And I think there are some things that we can learn. And I do think that it's important that we don't just say, oh, that's an issue that isn't important to me. So I just started with a few questions. And you know what? Since we started semi on time, we might even allow some answers to the questions instead of just me asking them rhetorically. So let's see here. Should we be filled with the existential fear of global climate change? That's a question. Should we? Why is that?
Well, in the first place, you can't do anything about it. God's in control of everything.
Love that. That's the exact answer I wanted. That's a great answer. Good job. How about this one? Will man-made climate issues destroy our planet?
Yes.
Who says yes?
I do.
Okay, so you think that will destroy...
We're already killing the bees with poison.
Okay, I'll bite.
Well,
Are we given a clue as to how our Earth will be destroyed? Say it again.
we're told exactly how the world.
That's right. I can understand where you're coming from, and I don't disagree that we do dumb things with our planet. Agreed. But we are given a clue.
Care of it.
Agreed. We'll talk about that. Yeah, we will talk about that. Go ahead. Annette, yes, you said we're given an exact of what will happen at the end of days. Okay? How about this one? Why has climate change, science, and politics become such an issue in American society?
Power.
Say it again.
Power.
Okay.
Power and control.
Okay, I'll bite. I think that's fair.
We've lost focus of God.
Say it again.
We've lost focus of God.
Yeah, and who's our provider?
To our world anymore. Like our government, the government was built on the foundations of God. Now it's like totally gone away.
Yeah, we are far removed. And I think we talked about this a little bit last week. When they lived in an agricultural society, you kind of have an understanding that God is providing this for me. And for us, we live in a different type of economic system where you don't have to harvest, you don't have to plant, and you still get by, right? So we've made that into an economy that we believe we are actually producers, right? That we're the ones doing it, as opposed to having faith and trust that someone else is going to provide for us.
Well, why are we not encouraging our people instead of putting them on welfare? Why aren't we encouraging gardening, owning chickens, actually providing for themselves versus the welfare stance and also the climate change affected by big agriculture and corporations owning our food supply?
First, I don't disagree with you. I think that having a garden is good for you. Teaches you a lot about life. I think that God does expect us to understand how life works. I don't disagree with that. We're not going to get crazy political because that I know it's fine. No, that does touch on politics. So I'll try to avoid that. But I do think that we can look at what some answers about this that might come from the Bible, because it can be political. I mean, if you're saying that capitalism is a bad concept, that's political.
I'm not saying capitalism is a bad concept. I'm saying when you put the food chain in the hands of one or two big major businesses that have subsidiary companies that also eat off of government subsidiaries, that you then are creating a huge global change that should not be happening. Where
It also, I don't disagree with that, but it also then provides people jobs that are not 24/7, 7 days a week working in a field such as in like China where half the people still do that. So, I mean, there are advantages to having, a more advanced economy. So,
And everybody's pushing gardens these days. Every paper you read, every
sure.
magazine.
Even restaurants, right? Farm to table. And I think that's a concept, farm to table restaurants. I love that. I think it's great. Okay, I do think that it has roots in biblical teaching. So let's look here. Boy, I should have maybe not asked a bunch of questions. This is good. It's good, though. I like it. I think it's good. I believe the answers to some of these questions are revealed to us in the Bible, regardless of real or perceived circumstances. Whether you believe that, oh my goodness, it's the end, we're about to, it's the, this or that. If you live on an island, it's a little bit bigger issue for you if there's some tidal, global warming causes a little bit of a rise in the water level. That's a bigger difference for you than if you live in the interior of the United States. Would we agree with that?
Yes.
Right? I think that, so these problems are about perspective oftentimes. Regardless of real or perceived circumstances, we should never be characterized by fear, dread, or anxiety. Here are 4 reasons why. Mr. Schubert already told us God is ultimately in control. Number 2, God has commanded us to not be afraid. Number 3, God has promised that the seasons will come, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm a geography teacher. I think it's kind of interesting. You guys are familiar with how seasons work? Anybody know what causes our seasons? And don't just say because God did it. I agree with you. Anybody else know how God did it? Yes, a tilt of the earth, right? So it's kind of interesting where you live on the planet. Again, perspective matters. If you live on the equator, you only have one season. What's the season? Summer, right? It's always hot, right? So we'll talk about that. And then the last one is that our primary focus should always be on people, right? And people and sharing God's word. That is our purpose. And so some of the situations here, we call them political situations. Economic situations is oftentimes what it is. And as somebody who, for my job, I talk about geography. So I understand that because of where we live, we have a unique perspective as opposed to someone who is living in agrarian life somewhere across the ocean. Yes, sir.
So to comment on your statement that we should not fear, that's so important because the headlines would make us fear things that we have no control over.
Agree 100%.
Recently, there was a headline that the core of the earth reversed its flow or something.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I don't even know how to worry about that. But we could get caught up in things like that and be paralyzed by fear and not act properly.
Sure. And I think that's one of them. One of the biggest, for me, volcanic tectonic plate movements and volcanoes. I'm not going to get crazy about how and all these things form, but I can tell you this. The tectonic plates, they do move, and we see them shift, and they create land. And when I say they, I know who has power over those. Who has power over tectonic plate movement? God does, right? And so the idea there is that when a volcano goes off, it puts off just a ridiculous amount of toxins into our atmosphere, right? And so we have no control over that. And so I think what most of us, we get frustrated sometimes. What are we going to do? Guys, our planet's been functioning for a long time. I'm not going to put numbers on that. That's for smarter people than me to come up with. But it's still spinning. Does that mean that we should just dig our heads in the sand and not try and protect our environment? I don't think that's it either. So let's look a little bit at some of these verses. One I'm going to look at first about ultimately God is in control. I think it's interesting because we are doing something where we're a little bit of worry and we kind of go, well, what can I do? What am I going to be able to do? What am I? And we look at ourselves, and then as a society, we have to, it's our responsibility to do X, Y, or Z, right? We do that all the time. There was another guy who did that. And he was even questioned by his buddies. And ultimately, he kind of said, he's questioning God. And I think sometimes when we look at some of these issues, and I'm not going to say just this issue, but sometimes we question God. Like, why would you allow this to happen? Or why would you do this? Or why would we do that? Anybody that probably has been here for any time at all knows that Job is probably one of my favorite books of the Bible. So when we start to think and question God, let's look in Job chapter 38. Job chapter 38. Now, if you're not familiar with the story, you should read it. If you're not familiar with the story of Job, you should read it. The longest piece of like poetry right in the middle of it. You got a great story at the beginning and then an ultimately amazing story at the end. I love the book. But I think for when we talk about, do we have control over our planet? I think we need to, 38. Job 38. When the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm, and this means like out of the storm. Like there was a storm, and this is the voice of God coming down, speaking. That's how I read it. You can look at it. It says this in chapter 40 as well. Okay? And so out of the storm, who is this that obscures my plans with words about knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. I kind of like this. It's like, you had 30-something chapters of Job's two buddies kind of giving him advice, and then Job's kind of questioning a little bit and kind of going, well, why are you doing this, God? And kind of asking questions, and this is God's response. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me, if you understand, who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measure line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstones while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? Who shut up the seas behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds of its garments and wrapped it in thick darkness, and I fixed limits for it. I set the doors and bars in place. And when I said, this far you may come and no further, here is what your proud waves halt. Have you ever given orders to the morning, or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. The wicked are denied their light, and the upraised arm is broken. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the deepest darkness? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me, if you know all this, what is the way to the abode of the light? And where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwellings? Surely you know, for you are already born, and you have lived so many years. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen where the storehouses of the hail, where I reserve for the times of trouble, for the days of war and battle? What is the way of the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of the rain, and a path for the thunderstorms to water? A land where no one lives, an uninhabited desert, to satisfy a desolate wasteland and make it sprout with grass. Does the rain have a father, whose father the drops of dew? From those womb comes the ice. Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens, when the waters become hard as a stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen? Can you bind these chains, the chains of Pleiades, that's a constellation, or loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations to their seasons, or lead out the bear with its cubs? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over earth? Can you raise your voice to the clouds and cover yourself with a flood of water? Do you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you? Here we are. Who gives the ibis wisdom, or gives the rooster understanding? Who has the wisdom to count the clouds? Who can tip over the water jars of the heaven when the dust becomes hard and the clods of earth stick together? Do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions when they crouch in their dens or lay in wait for the thicket? Who provides food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wonder about the lack of food? I'm going to stop right there. You can continue reading 39 and 40, and you can talk about the behemoth and the leviathan, which are cool stories. But I think you get the idea there. God takes care of this planet. It's not even close.
He's
Our
kind of laughing at anybody who thinks that they can.
exactly.
But when
It's
you wake up in the morning, you have a choice if you're going to use Roundup or not.
yeah.
I
Okay.
think Doug got a little frustrated when Joe Quickly said that, who do you think you are?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. If you think that our existence here on the planet, that my individual existence on this planet is such a huge deal that I'm having the biggest impact in the world, that's to me, I kind of view that as kind of being narcissistic.
Well, it's not just one, it's a lot.
Well,
One at a time. Go ahead.
we're given to be stewards of the earth, and so on a local level, like try not to poison our aquifers or our wells.
Sure.
Those
Agreed.
are things that we are called to do. But as far as a global thing, that's not our place. We are tiny minnows in the sea, and as much as we can tell, we can't go and tell everybody like, you have to do this. This is what you have to do. That's not our place to go and tell people exactly what they're supposed to do. That's God's place to handle that.
I tend to agree with you, but like I said, we'll try not to get.
Although on a local level, we're supposed to take care of our place around us so that we don't hurt ourselves.
Agree with that.
And I'm pretty sure that it was God's purpose is so that we don't poison ourselves and kill ourselves off.
I agree with you. Okay, go ahead. You mentioned Roundup. Yeah,
Okay, well, God created this perfect ecosystem.
I agree. We started messing that up a long time ago.
And that stuff that's in there, it starts destroying, and then if you kill a species to extinction, you're wrong. You're just wrong.
Well, we're going to talk about how God put humans.
everything is necessary.
Sure, God did put humans in. They gave dominion over the animals. Adam, right? Okay. I'm not going to disagree. I'm not going to say you're wrong on some of this, but if you know what the leading, and you can ask scientists this, the leading cause of problems in the environment here on our planet, the number one factor is basic agriculture. Because when we chose to cut down things and then plant stuff, that's not normal in our environment. So you mentioned Roundup, which is also not normal, but we chose to do that years ago. So let's think before there were, chemists that could do all those things. We were already doing things that probably weren't the best for the environment. However, we also see examples of agriculture throughout the Bible, right? The first, some of the first people on our planet were farmers, right? So I don't disagree that we do make bad decisions with some of the things, and that's up for debate. However, we've been doing things to our planet that are not super for them for a long time, right? And as far as species, there's been thousands of species that have gone and come and gone. God's chosen a whole bunch of them to die at the flood, right? And then after that, some of those, like one of them is like the dodo bird. Well, if the bird is too dumb to figure out how to survive, it was the dodo, right? So there are certain species and certain things that we choose to put more emphasis on because of their value to humans. For example, there are more agricultural animals than there ever have been. Does that make sense? So like, I agree with you on a local level. I kind of agree with what you're saying there. It is my responsibility at a local level, and I do think we should make wise decisions about the things we put in our food and things like that. I am a huge fan. You want to have those pollinators. Like I don't want you to think I'm trying to get crazy there, but just look at the things as a whole. God will take care of our planet. If we mess it up, God will fix it. And He provides us with it.
If there's toy, you buy them a new one.
So, I'm sorry?
If your child breaks a toy, you buy them a new one.
I guess it depends.
We're His children. He gave us this earth. If we're tearing it up, why would He fix it?
That's what He's been doing for thousands of years. That's like if I mess up and He doesn't give me grace and forgiveness, I hope I'm hoping for that. I'm cheering for that. Go ahead, and then we'll go back over here.
I have a story on that, but the Berlin Wall House, they had all these East German cars coming. They stink. If oil was going in,
Okay, gotcha.
Berlin was full of oil. You couldn't hardly breathe. There's none of it now. You can't measure it.
Yeah. Yeah, our planet is designed to filtrate itself. The largest filtration system on the planet is our oceans, right? It filters everything, right? You pour a gallon, just pour oil, nasty oil, used motor oil on the ground. By the time it gets to our aquifer here, where it's 300 feet, how much oil is it going to affect you? If you dump used motor oil directly on the ground, right over my well, how long would it take for that oil to contaminate my well? Will it contaminate my well? It will not. Why? Because
bugs to eat that oil.
yeah, we have systems built in. I agree with you. We do some stupid things. I will not disagree with that. But my point here is that God is ultimately in control, not us. Amen. And it is very, very to get paranoid and freak out about it and go crazy about it is one of those things that I think we've been asked not to do too. When it comes to God has commanded us not to be afraid. And when we say that climate change is the largest existential threat to society, I'd say maybe hunger and poverty might take a little bit over that. Like that's maybe just me personally. So let's just look here in Matthew chapter 6. You guys are familiar with this. God tells us it's at the Sermon on the Mount, and God in the book of Matthew chapter 6 verses 25 through 34. Matthew 6, 25 through 34. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body or what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap what they store away in barns, yet their heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field, they do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow thrown into the fire, will He not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? And so, and again, as I mentioned earlier, I have no agenda here. I just think that it's interesting when we have a topic that people are afraid to talk about. Why don't we look at that topic from a perspective of what the Bible tells us? It's been pointed out before by others. The Bible commands us to not be afraid. I think we mentioned before it's 365 times God tells us not to be afraid, which is one for every day. Right, one for every day. So if each morning you should wake up and realize, hey, maybe we need to do that. We need to do the Bible read of each one of those to maybe help us not be afraid. And I think for some of us, that fear is different. For me, it's, hey, am I going to be able to do my job well? Or am I going to be able to, be a good dad? Or am I going to be able to be a good husband? And when you wake up each morning, you have these fears, and sometimes our fears are different. I would say when we add additional fears to our lives, I don't know how much that's going to give us gain. And again, that's just my opinion. But I know that right now, there's like some messaging out there, I guess, that this should be something we should be fearful of. And I disagree. I don't think we should be fearful. News headlines are filled with reasons for fear, rumors of war, reports of natural disasters, global pandemics. You can fill in the blanks. God knew we would have many reasons to fear, just as the original audience of the reading of the Scriptures did. Yet He still commands us to fear not. Like God knows exactly what's going on. right? And I think because we have developed into a society that's very dependent on me and what I do, and that this is how I make a living. This is how, society chooses to do things, as opposed to being kind of dependent on God. I think our independence, and maybe even our society as Americans, we've decided that, hey, you know what? Up by my bootstraps, I can do this myself, right? I'm not sure that in some ways that actually kind of might be a bad idea when it comes to our faith and our belief sets. Because we have, as a society, we've become one of the wealthiest nations, and so instead of having our reliance be on God, it's on, look what I did. And trust me, I'm pointing fingers back at myself, like we do this. But I can tell you, God doesn't want us to be afraid, and He is in charge. And I would try to impress upon you that those are two things you can take to the bank. That's in God's Word so many times. You can take that to the bank. All right, let's look at these last two. Only got a few minutes, but that's okay. God promised the seasons will come. After the flood, God made a promise to Noah and his descendants, which includes you. Okay? We read in Genesis, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Now here's what's interesting. The area where you live and the area where this would have been written and played out. We think about the Middle East, where these things occur. Anybody know and follow and understand what latitude is? What is latitude? Anybody know what latitude is? Latitude is the distance from the equator that you live. You can either live north or south of the equator, and it's a set distance that goes all the way up to 90 degrees. 90 degrees, North Pole. 90 degrees south, South Pole. Okay? Anybody want to have an idea of the latitude of the Middle East? Like in this particular region, it's around 31, Jerusalem is at 31 degrees north latitude. Okay, 31 degrees north latitude. Okay? Anybody want to guess the latitude of where we live? 30.7. We are almost identical in latitude to where Jerusalem was. So when it talks about seasons for them, I believe that if you look at basic physics, it would make sense that we would also have those seasons. Does that mean that some of them aren't going to be longer than others? Boy, you remember a few years back when we had the 70 days of 100+ weather, right? That doesn't change. And then you also have Snowmageddon, right? Right? And we have these things. And I truly believe that God has promised that the seasons will continue. That's what's going to happen. Okay? And then if you read, let's see here. It's in 2 Peter 3, 1 through 13. 2 Peter 3. Second Peter 3. Dear friends, it is now my second letter to you. I've written both to you, both of them as reminders to stimulate you to wholesome thinking. And I want to recall the words spoken in the past by the holy prophets and command given to the Lord and Savior through your apostles. Above all, you must understand that the last days scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, "Where is this coming he promised? Ever since our ancestors died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation." But they deliberately forgot that long ago, by God's word, the heavens came into being, and the earth was formed out of water and by water. By these waters also the world of that time was deluged and destroyed. By the same world, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. But do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like a day. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare. That's how our world will end, with fire, not with a rise in water. And if you follow climate science, that's the fear right now, is that we're going to be flooded, that the lands will be flooded, that it will take in and drown cities and people who live on the coasts. Guys, we choose as humans to live in certain areas for thousands and thousands of years, right? I teach this every year in my geography classes. The first major civilizations on the planet were along river valleys, right? Anybody study that? The river valleys. So you have like Mesoamerica, you have some in Mesopotamia, you have some in Egypt, you have some in the Far East, and then they develop and they move. And as people travel and intermingle, they choose to live in certain places. Maybe, along with poor agricultural processes, which we talked about, but maybe if something did happen to where flooding was, kind of overflowed, and we had some areas that needed to be changed, well, wouldn't other areas become more inhabitable? For example, Russia spans 11 time zones. The biggest problem with most of the Russian tundra is that it's inaccessible. Canada, same situation. There are resources galore that we as humans can't access because of temperatures. If the global climate did rise, wouldn't some of those areas become more suitable and inhabitable for humans? And maybe the places that are on the edges of the ocean, where we probably shouldn't build anyway, that's my opinion. That's just my opinion. If you get washed out of New Orleans every time, then maybe stop building there. All right. And as somebody who likes geography, our planet is well taken care of. Typically on coastlines, you know what's there for an interior for about 4 to 5 miles? Usually, before that, there's a barrier. It's usually thick forests. But what do we do with those? We want to have that beach view, so what do we do with the forests? And guess what the forests used to do when a hurricane would come in? It kind of put a damper on it. But in our infinite wisdom, just like putting the Roundup all over stuff, we chose to cut down some of nature, change it up. Now, am I saying that's wrong? No, but I'm saying as humans, we should be adapting to what the Lord provides us with, as opposed to trying to be the ones who are making all the changes. We can adapt. There's a difference between modifying and adapting. We're blessed to live on the planet He gave us. And we should be doing the best things we can to preserve that. But without fear and understanding that He's ultimately in charge. And the last thing here I put is primary goals should be on people. And we talked about, I just mentioned that we're made in God's image. And we are commanded to do a lot of things. We are asked to be stewards, but more times than we are asked to be stewards in the Bible, we are asked to take care of each other. We're asked to love each other and to feed those who are hungry. And guys, unfortunately, a lot of the current political processes that are going through, if you are asking people to make sacrifices for like your power, hey, we should all move to X, Y, or Z, it's just an unrealistic expectation in third world countries. They should be awarded the same opportunities we have with things like electricity, running water, vehicles that can get you from point A to point B, the ability to make an income that is more than just sustenance. And to do that right now, we just don't have the technology to make those types of sustainable developments. Those can only really happen right now in the upper echelons. And even then, guys, I can tell you right now, there's communities that we live in right now that the last thing on their mind is trying to get solar panels on their house. They just want a meal to eat. And so we have to look at it. Sometimes those policies, it's great in theory, but I think going back to what Mr. Hagan said is independently, what can I do to have an impact on my day-to-day stewardship and my relationship with people around me? And I think that if we focus on that, then the fear of global climate change really shouldn't be a fear at all. So,
I think if you want to learn to adapt, move to another country for a while, learn their ways, and if you go through a complete culture shock like I did, you are shocked.
sure, I agree. I think we sometimes, and I try to teach this to my kids, because a lot of them haven't, some of them hadn't left Burnet County, to understand just how blessed you are. You can be poor here, and you're beyond wealthy in other places around this planet. So, thank you guys for your time. I hope that at least made you think a little.